Hello everyone, back tuning in to today's first video, doing JMA Friday for today's first video. So as always on a Friday, we're having a look at the weather for the month ahead. And this is going to take us to the beginning of February. So we're going to go to the first day of February, I think, with JMA Friday today, covering the rest of January. Now, we know we've had the southern stratospheric warming that we've been talking about in videos for the past couple of weeks. We're looking to see where we get a tropospheric response in the form of northern blocking. If we do get northern blocking, then it could well get a lot colder through the middle and second half of the winter, and that's what we're going to be looking at for signs of for JMA Friday today. Will there be signs of northern blocking? You'll find out in about a minute's time. Now, before we get on with that, just say that today's second video will be coming up later on this afternoon, and that's detailing weather for the next week to 10 days. So we'll be talking about the southern stratospheric warming again in that one. We'll be looking to see what's happening in the next week to 10 days. Will there be signs of colder weather? You will find out in today's second video update. But starting us off today is JMA Friday, so we're going to have a look at the 500 millibar height anomaly flow charts from the JMA first of all. We're looking at the North Pole view down, so this is the North Pole of the Northern Hemisphere just here. The latitudes, Northern Hemisphere are around there. Red is extrapolating to above average heights, which is high pressure, yellow, orange and red, and then the dark colours, the blues, they are extrapolating to below average heights, which is low pressure. These are broken down into week periods, so the first week period will take us from today, the 4th, through to the 11th of January. We find that in the week ahead, we've got an area of above average height centred over the top of the UK, and also going to the north as well, with below average heights in the middle of the Atlantic around here. That means the flow and the jet doing something rather like that. Winter biting across eastern parts of Europe with this trough of below average heights. For us, we're centred under that area of high pressure, so there will be a lot of dry weather coming up. And it could be quite cold at times as well under that area of high pressure, particularly where skies are clear. You could well get frost and fog. Then we go through to week 2, and it looks rather odd. This is going from the 11th through to the 18th of January. And suddenly we lose that area of high pressure. We've just got loads of sort of low pressure, or below average heights anyway, very close to the UK. So we've got below average heights down here and also over to the east. That's a very strange looking chart. I'm not at all sure what's going on there, other than it probably is turning quite a bit more unsettled. It does look as though there's a trough within the 500 millibar flow as well. The way these blue colours are kind of like dipping down in that sort of fashion. So it could be a bit on the cold side, that, but perhaps a bit cold and unsettled there through the middle part of January. But again, it is a very strange looking anomaly. And then we go through to weeks 3 and 4. It takes us from the 18th of January through to the 1st of February. And look at this, we have got signs of northern blocking appearing. We've got above average heights turning up in this 2-weekly period around Greenland and Iceland. Below average heights are underneath it in the middle of the Atlantic and going into Europe, and also across northeastern parts of Europe up there. So you expect to be pulling in quite cold air from an easterly or northeasterly direction with that. And again, that's a 2-weekly anomaly. It's weeks 3 and 4. So it might be a little bit transitional. It might be something like week 3 turns rather cold, and then week 4 it turns much more blocked and potentially very cold. You can never rule out something like that in a 2-weekly anomaly. But definite signs of some high pressure around Greenland and Iceland, which could well turn us quite a lot colder there as we're going into the second half of January, into the end of January. Right, this is a tropical and mid-latitude view. Have a look at the temperature and precipitation anomalies. British Isles is just here in right-hand corner of the chart as you are looking at it. Mind you, for week 1, 500 millibar height, only with high pressure centred over top of the UK. Going to be a lot of dry weather with that. Winter biting in the east and the southeast of Europe with this trough of low pressure, bringing down very cold air out of the Arctic and Russia. For us, we're protected to some degree by that area of high pressure. Temperature anomalies in the week ahead are looking like this. Again, it's going from the 4th to the 11th of January. So most parts of the UK coming out milder than average in the week ahead. It is cold and average to the south, and much of the continent, particularly southeastern parts of Europe, looking very, very cold indeed. I think that temperature anomaly might be a little bit on the mild side, actually. I suspect under this ridge of high pressure, what the model isn't picking up on is chance of frost and fog. So I suspect it'll probably be a little bit cooler, actually, than the model is suggesting there. But nevertheless, nothing particularly cold from an Arctic or Siberian sort of perspective with that one. The temperature anomaly in the week ahead, or I should say precipitation anomaly in the week ahead, is a lot drier than average as well. So drier and milder than average under high pressure, if the model is right, but probably a bit cooler than the model is suggesting in the week ahead. Then we have this very strange 500 millibar height anomaly for week 2. It's the 11th to the 18th of January, with below average heights covering the UK, but also covering many parts of the northern hemisphere, really, particularly on our side of the hemisphere. We do have this big ridge over towards Canada and North America over here. Looks like there's a bit of a dip within the 500 millibar flow as well with the jet stream. So it looks like it would be cooler, but it also looks like it should be quite unsettled. So temperature anomaly still slightly above average in week 2. But much less so than is the case in week 1. So a bit of a cool down is definitely taking place there. And precipitation-wise, so not overly unsettled. You would have thought that with that big trough extending through much of northern Europe, would be quite unsettled, but actually still coming out a little bit drier than average. So it's a very strange anomaly there that the JMA has come up with for week 2, 11th to the 18th of January. And then we're through to weeks 3 and 4. It's the 18th of January to the 1st of February. And we find that we have this area of blocking setting up. Can't see Greenland and Iceland on this view, but we know we've got an area of blocking high pressure setting up around there. Low pressure is underneath it in the middle of the Atlantic. Looks like the jet stream will be going southwards as well, and we will probably be starting to pull in cold winds from a northerly or easterly direction. Now, the temperature anomaly is not particularly cold. In fact, it's still coming out a little bit milder than average there for the UK, and most central parts of Europe. Winter is biting over in the east of Europe. Again, remember, that's a 2-weekly temperature anomaly, so I suspect with high pressure building up over Greenland and Iceland, eventually there is going to be some significantly cold weather. But it could be that the cold is pushed back to week 4, and week 3 perhaps is still a little bit on the milder side. And that's how the 2-weekly temperature anomaly is coming out slightly above average. These long-range models often overcook temperatures a little bit anyway. So I think the signal's definitely there for a colder end to January. Precipitation-wise, we find that it's coming out drier than average for weeks 3 and 4 across the UK and Ireland once again. So this is showing up to be a really quite a dry January if the JMA is right, notably dry, but getting probably progressively colder, particularly towards the latter stages of the month. Let's see how the CFS V2 compares. So again, these are 500 millibar heights, and they're broken down into weekly periods. The first weekly period takes us from the 4th to the 10th of January, with above average heights centred over the UK and going a little bit to our north as well. Lots of dry weather, high pressure well and truly in control. Winter is biting in the east of Europe with this trough of low pressure. That's where the really cold Arctic air is, around that trough of low pressure, particularly through places like the Balkans and going over to the Black Sea and then down towards Romania, Greece, Turkey, all of those sort of areas likely to be seeing winter biting. Even into parts of southern Italy, you could see some news reports of snow turning up across unusual parts of Italy, perhaps in the next few days. So winter down there. We are under this ridge of high pressure, being protected to some degree by these cold temperatures, but nevertheless, under that ridge, it probably is still a little bit on the cold side with frost and fog. Week 2 shows very little change. This is the 11th to the 17th of January. Again, we've got this big trough extending from the Arctic down through these eastern and northeastern parts of Europe with northerly winds. Winter is really biting in down there. And then we have the above average heights pulling out into the Atlantic a little bit. So that might be starting to let in some slightly cooler air for us. The real wintry pushes across northeastern and eastern parts of Europe with that trough just there and also the trough there. But with the high pressure just pulling out that little bit to the west of the country, we may be starting to get some slightly cooler air coming in from a northwesterly direction. Perhaps doing something a bit like that with the flow. For us, still a lot of dry weather. We're close to an area of high pressure. Then we go through to week 3, and it's all changed. So this is something that's been showing up. We're looking at the CFS V2 through the week. It is something that's been picking up on day by day, raising the heights in the third week of January, which is the 18th to the 24th of January. Raising heights in the Northern Atlantic and up to Greenland. So signs of northern blocking there. The trough of below average heights, which was extending through the east of Europe through weeks 1 and 2, is backing westwards into the west of Europe. So this is pulling cold air down into central, northern and western parts of Europe with the flow and the jet doing something like that. Obviously with the trough of below average heights, it's also unsettled, so there would be an increasing risk of snow expanding across many parts of central and northern Europe, and the UK and Ireland could be included in that snow risk there as well. And then this takes us on to week 4, which is the 25th of January through to the 31st. And again, northern blocking, high pressure is around Greenland and is extending back into the top of the North Pole as well. Below average heights across the northeast of Europe and also extending down into central parts of Europe like that. So again, we will probably be bringing down cold or even very cold air from a north or northeasterly direction, and with that trough of below average heights we could well be feeding in snow to the UK. That could be quite a snowy setup for the UK. Winter really setting in there potentially through the latter part of January, through the final week of January. You could really see winter biting there with the wind in from the east or the northeast. The trough of below average heights is through central parts of Europe. That would be feeding snow in across much of central and northern Europe, and the UK could be included in that as well. And the main thing is this really strong blocking signal that's around Greenland and going back into the North Pole. So signs of winter in the second half of January. Temperature anomalies from the CFS V2 in the week ahead from the 4th to the 10th of January are milder than average through much of the UK and Ireland. Very cold over in the east and the southeast of Europe, and also towards the Black Sea and the west of Russia. Really, really cold there. But out in the northwest, we're protected from those very cold Arctic winds, and so it isn't overly cold. In fact, it's reasonably mild. And that continues into week 2 as well, coming out with a milder than average temperature anomaly from the 11th to the 17th of January. A little bit above average with temperatures there. Again, over in the east and the southeast of Europe and up to western parts of Russia, we see that winter is well and truly biting in there with those deep blue colours indicating very cold temperature anomalies. Things start to change in week 3. This is the 18th to the 24th of January. We see it's starting to go a little bit cooler than average, a little bit colder than average for the UK. Some central parts of Europe are beginning to go cold and average. Notice in the southeast of Europe, the temperature anomaly is lifting up. So the cold temperatures are transferring northwards across central and northern parts of Europe as we begin to turn a little bit less cold in the southeast of Europe. And then that takes us through to week 4, which is the 25th through to the 31st of January. UK is looking a bit colder than average then. Most parts of central and northern Europe also turning much colder through week 4. It turns much colder through central Europe and going back into the west of Russia. So cold air is surging across many parts of Europe through that final week of January. And I think the UK would be included in that as well, and Ireland too. I think the signals are definitely there from both the JMA and the CFS for blocking and much colder weather later in January. Precipitation anomalies from the 4th through to the 10th of January are looking like this, much drier than average in the week ahead, and then we go through to week 2, and it's still pretty much on the drier than average side as well. So weeks 1 and 2 both coming out drier than average. Week 3, it's a more unsettled week as it's turning cold. It's also turning more unsettled, so precipitation anomaly then is close to average. That's how we finish up the week 4. Fairly weak signals for precipitation by then, as they usually are. We've gone to average. It looks like it's a more unsettled pattern, and particularly so, I would have thought, well, it doesn't really show it through these central parts of Europe where that trough of low pressure is setting up. And of course, the precipitation there would be primarily snow as the air is turning much colder. For the UK and for Ireland, it probably wouldn't be overly unsettled, but with much colder weather and with normal blocking, any precipitation that does fall would more than likely be falling as sleet or snow. Bear in mind that cold air holds less moisture than mild air, so when it's cold you will never get as much precipitation, or very rarely will you get as much precipitation when it's cold as you will do when it's mild or warm, because cold air holds less moisture. But I think the general idea is more unsettled, but also a lot colder through the second half of January. So, what do we make of that? It's a very interesting update, I think, and the signs are there that we may well be getting this tropospheric response that we're looking for from a sudden stratospheric warming in the second half of January. It's a slow burn. I said this yesterday's video. I know there's quite a bit of disappointment yesterday about the January forecast, which came out a little bit milder than average, but the reason that is so complicated is that January, and this was always something that's coming out within the winter forecast as well, January is a transitional month. So basically, the general idea for the winter is that December is going to be the mildest part, February was very likely to be the coldest part, January is like the transition from one thing to the other, from mild to cold, and it's how quickly that transition takes place that makes January such a difficult month to forecast for. If a transition happens very early, then we could come away with actually really quite a cold January. But if the transition doesn't happen until quite late in January, then we're still going to come out a little bit milder than average, probably. Bear in mind that these ridges we've got at the moment are producing frost and fog, so it's probably not going to be an overly mild start to January. So a cold and average January can't be ruled out here, but it looks like it'll be later on in the month that we get the tropospheric response to this stratospheric warming. But, as I said yesterday, don't give up on this winter by any means. I think there's a lot still to play for this winter. There's a lot still to play out, and I don't think we've even started really with the winter of 2018-19. I think we've got a long way to go, and at some point before this winter is done, I think we'll get an appreciable amount of very cold and wintry weather. So just wait and see how this is going to play out. And certainly the signs are there this morning from both the JMA and the CFS V2 that the further on into January we're going, the greater the risk of significant northern blocking, and thus the greater the risk of cold and snowy outbreaks. Right, that's JMA Friday done and dusted for you for this week. We'll look at it all over again next week. Remember, these rise wells are highly experimental. They are prone to chopping and changing. It might look different when we look at it next week, but that's what it's showing for this week. Come back later on this afternoon. We'll have a look at the weather for the next week to 10 days. But that's all for now, and thanks for watching.